Welcome back, everyone, to the next episode of the Industrial Innovators podcast with me, Don Cooper, and my co-host, Michael Brown. Today, I'm wearing my I Love Composites t-shirt. You can see it, and that's because we've had a really great breakthrough with the legislation around engineered composites on piping with the AB-539 the AB-539 piping legislation. And it is going to allow us to really expand what's going on with how composites are leveraged. So I'm not the expert. I've got Mikey here. Mike knows everything about it. So Mike, when we first, we lobbied for a long time with a lot of industry stakeholders to get the composite legislation through ABSA and then recognized in other jurisdictions like Saskatchewan, and everything was fine. Everyone was starting to leverage it. We were helping clients learn, and then about 9-10 months ago, maybe a year ago, there was a little bit of a blip. What was that blip? What happened with AB 539 that kind of slowed down the momentum?
Well, what ended up happening was we were registering a lot of through-hole composites off the hop there. So there's type A defects and there's type B defects. A type A defect is it's not currently leaking. A type B defect is a through wall, and unfortunately, it's hard for people to get ahead of it and find the need for a composite. If it's not already leaking, you got to be pretty proactive with an inspection program to find thinning elbows and everything else. And then, once it starts leaking, it becomes the real issue. So right off the hop, we were doing a lot of registrations for through wall defects. And, there was, I'd say we had successfully registered north of 25 or 30 of them right off the hop. All sorts of services from steam to, hydrocarbons, whatever it may be, doing a lot of registrations. And then probably about last May, it was halted and we weren't allowed to do through wall. So only type A defects would get registration. And as of October 10th of this year, it's changed, and we're now allowed to come out to site, perform stop gapping, which would be mitigating the leak while it's in service. And we can just design that stop gap around a circumferential slot is what we would call it, and make that area now the defect and successfully register through ABSA.
So when AB 539 first came out, it talked about A and B defects a little bit, but the interpretation of it was a little bit gray, or certainly, it wasn't being interpreted as restrictive originally. That's why we were doing so many active leaking repairs at the beginning, right?
Correct, yeah.
And then, and then through a series of inquiries or people making requests to ABSA, they had a closer look and decided that they needed to look deeper at that particular part of the legislation.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they had a pile of case studies that, deemed it successful. So, I mean, not just Innovator, but a lot of people across the industry were doing these registrations. I think we, kind of were the flagship for it, and we had probably the most registrations of through walls. But at the end of the day, the proof was in the pudding. It was working. So they just needed to change the legislation to allow us to do so. And I think it's going to be very successful for us moving forward.
You said they sort of halted it in May, but my recollection is leading up to that sort of halt, there was still a lot of delay, wasn't there? Like from January, February through to spring, there was just a veil of uncertainty around what was going to happen with it, but all the through-hole kinds of registrations or requests were at least taking longer, and in some cases were not getting approved until they sort of said stop in May. Is that kind of how it played out?
It certainly did slow down when it very first came out. I mean, we were doing tons and tons of composite repairs. In between that gap, where there was it became a no-no. We certainly slowed down. I mean, we were still doing composite repairs and registering them, but it was just none of them being through wall. Like I say, it's hard to find those projects ahead of time.
Yeah, it takes a very active and very not just proactive but very intense inspection program to find all the places where people are getting thinning wall before they get the obvious indication. And we did an episode a few weeks ago. We were talking about winter is coming, and when winter comes, that's when all the nuisance leaks become obvious, because those invisible leaks become steam plumes, or at least heat plumes, right?
Yeah.
And in the case of through hole of any sort, you don't know that you're going to lose wall integrity until it starts spraying sometimes, right?
Yeah. And I mean, the big thing too with like the composites is I find that it takes a lot of educating on our part for people to know where they can and cannot use them. So,
right.
As you know, we've actually created a program that we go out to site and we can teach inspectors on how AB-539 works. And at the end of the day, they get a certificate from Innovator that shows them, like, we take them out and we show them what properly mixed epoxy looks like. We show them the limitations. We show them, how the registration works, what's required in an owner letter. And we walk them through, A to Z. And ever since that, I think that for the end users that we've done that program for, we're seeing a big uptick in composites from them, because it's such a it's such a great tool for them to have. I mean, opposed to a big, heavy, expensive engineered enclosure, if you can put a composite wrap on it with an ABSA blessing for 2 years, I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? So,
yeah. Well, and for the listeners, sort of context, inside of both the ASME PCC 2 code and particularly AB-539, there's responsibilities laid out for all the stakeholders. And, those stakeholders are the manufacturers of the material. They have to have certain protocols and testing that they need to go through to get their material approved. You've got the installer, people like us who are going out and evaluating and installing the repair. We have to have registered procedures. Those procedures need to be approved by the regulator. We've got to train and go through a competency process with all of our installer technicians so that they are certified under the program. We've obviously got the regulator who has their responsibilities to guide and approve the process of, the suppliers, the installers. And then you have the responsibilities of the owner of the facility. And under the legislation, it also has a requirement for the owners to do due diligence to make sure that their inspectors and engineers are competent in being able to audit and inspect the installer and to understand where they can and can't use composites, so that under their program they're capable to do their part. And obviously there's some documentation around registration that they need to do. The problem is, or the challenge for, I think, a lot of people is, the regulators went through a 2 or 3 year process of developing the legislation. They know what their responsibilities are. Us as as an installer, service solution provider, we've been working on this for, the entirety of the history of the company, literally decades of time put into procedures and installation and everything. The manufacturers, that's the business that they're in. They are always testing because they have to test under other legislations, under ISO 9000 legislations, or the composite version of that, and the PCC legislation. And the one missing piece that is the challenge is, where do the owners and inspectors go to learn their responsibilities and how to do it? And I think just as importantly, I think this is really key with anything to do with specialty services. most owner team members, they don't know what they don't know in terms of new capabilities, new technologies. And so, if you don't know that you can repair this with a legally registered, composite solution, you're going to go with other traditional methods. You're not even thinking about, how do I save time? How do I save money? How do I improve safety by leveraging composite over putting it on a turnaround list or putting it on or making it an EPE sort of enclosure. What we've seen and so to bridge that gap, because no one was solving it, we put together the AB-539 inspectors course, and you've done that with 3 or maybe 2, 3, 4 clients right now. But I was in a meeting with a client yesterday at another who is a group of major oil sands operators, and they were asking me all kinds of questions around where they can use composites. And I simply said to them, told them what's going on with AB-539, what's going on with the new update, and simply said, we have a course, we can put your people through it, and then you guys will be on the same page with the regulator and with us as an installer, and really streamline, because they had questions around what do they have to do to get, to be able to leverage composites faster, and they literally didn't know. They need the guidance, they need the training. So the program that you and your team put together, I think is going to be key, particularly now that ABSA has upped their game and removed the uncertainty around through holes. And I'll say this, we put it on our business goals when we started the company in 2009 that we wanted to achieve getting regulatory recognition of engineered composites. And it took us from 2009 till when did we get AB-539? Like 2021 maybe, when it became legal, when it first came out, late 2021.
Yeah.
So it took us what is that? 12 years or so to 11 or 12 years to get legislation. And so it's not very often that I'll give ABSA credit, because I'm not, I value regulatory compliance, but it's often very bureaucratic and dragged out much longer than it needs to be. Everything is too much red tape, right? And I think everyone wants to do things right, but they don't want to have to take 3 years to figure out how to do it right. So ABSA taking this from May until October and getting this right, this is a big shout out to ABSA. I'm super impressed that they were able to provide clarity to everyone on and updating the language in the legislation to allow through-hole repairs this fast. I honestly, I was expecting this to take a year or two. When you came to me a few weeks ago and said, "Hey, it's done," because you told me in August that they had the draft, and they were doing final reviews, and it was going to come out. I'm like, yeah, I'll wait and see what happens. Yeah. But for it to go from May to October, for them to tighten this up, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're closer to it than me. What do you estimate is the exposure in terms of the amount of need for what are deemed through-hole or active leak repairs compared to non-leaking repairs? What's the percentage do you think that's out there in terms of from customers?
80-20 is what I would say. That's probably it, right? So it's going to be a huge uptick in business, and right now, just like anything, when they roll something out, like you said, it's been out for 3 years. They did some revisions. I think that they have fairly good numbers on both sides for pressure and temperature limitations, which is, that 482F is kind of the mark for design temp, and 500 PSI. So those two numbers, it makes sense. But I think that over the, as the years progress, I think that we can start to push those numbers up to allow for higher installations as well.
Right.
One on the temperature side, but I think the pressure side, it'd be nice to be able to get 600-pound steam lines in play as well, and stuff like that, because those are real problems for plants as well. But hey, I'm glad we can do the through holes, and right now with the limitations the way they are, there's going to be a lot of business, and it's just going to be so handy for end users to be able to use this to their advantage.
Because, internationally, the ABSA, or the ASME code, PCC2, and the international code, the ISO legislations that are all provide guidance around engineered composites on a global scale, they don't have those limitations. Just to be clear for the listeners, outside of the sort of conservative limits that AB539 has put on temperature and pressure, internationally, and from an engineering standpoint, is there any limit really on what composite can do from a pressure standpoint?
We've seen. I wouldn't say. Well, there is, because you just got to look at feasibility. Like, I've put together a package before where you've got a 3,000 psi system, and you're talking 120 layers. At some point you just got to weigh the obvious and say, this isn't the right repair. You need to go with an engineered enclosure. But like I say, that 600-pound mark is very, very achievable for any wraps. If you whether you want to go down the registered or non-registered route. Most piping systems are registered that would operate at that pressure, to be honest. But like I say, I think that as this thing progresses, it's pretty obvious that ABSA is willing to let the thing kind of grow and evolve.
Okay, so just to wrap things up and provide clarity for everyone who will listen to this after we publish this brief update recording. Based on what's changed, what can customers now do under AB539? Like, what does this open up in terms of the defects, the sizes, the temperatures, the pressures? Like, what can they do now?
Anything that is design temperature of under 482 F and 500 psi, whether it be leaking or not. You can leverage composites as a registered system.
And any particular service limitations?
No, that you can get away with, some hydrocarbons. There's acids are kind of a different story, but typically not under ABSA. So not really. We take it as a case by case basis. So we'll just walk through any time that you guys call. We'll just walk through with you the services and the pressure limitations and make sure that it's something that we can help you out with. And if we can't, then we can always, propose an enclosure or something else.
Okay. So we're back in business, being able to repair the kinds of leaks that customers need repaired.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'm going to do, an obvious plug for something that we've found has been very successful over the last few months. I was meeting with clients yesterday, and we were doing the typical contract negotiations where they were talking about rates, and then we kind of pivoted the conversation into being a cost-effective solutions provider. Do you need scaffold to install composites?
No, well, depending, but no, we can also do those off ropes.
Right.
We do have size limitations and a pretty detailed procedure on what we would allow, but we've done 18 feet runs off ropes.
Right. So we're talking about rope access and installation of composite and combining those two things together. So you're taking the best parts of AB539, including through holes, and leveraging it with rope access, adding in some of your sparkless surface prep tools to eliminate some of those hot work issues, and then eliminating the scaffolding to really make it a pretty strong value proposition for piping repair.
You bet.
Yeah. How often are we, I know it's a relatively new thing, how many composite jobs have we done off ropes since we started this in the last few weeks?
7.
So it's not, it's new, but it's not brand new.
Yep.
Right. And you've recently expanded your capabilities around rope access repairs. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
With your means of location, or
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We now, I mean, we really started with it in the west, at our Spruce Grove branch is where we initially kind of kicked it off and got everything rolling. Now we have technicians trained in our Hamilton branch and Atlantic branch as well. So we
So-
straight across the country, we can help out with that.
Coast to coast.
You bet.
All right. Thanks, Mikey. So there you have it, folks. The AB-539 is back in full swing, including through-hole repairs. And in addition, if you're listening and you are a bit uncertain as an owner where you can use composites, where you can't, reach out to our team and ask them about how we can get your team through the AB-539 Engineers and Inspectors course, because that's the piece that will not only educate and give your people the know-how of where they can and can't use it, but it actually will then meet your regulatory compliance requirements under the legislation to say that you are doing your part to deem your people competent. And so that kind of creates the full circle with everyone understanding their responsibilities and arming your team with the know-how of where they can and where they can't use it and how to work best with whoever you choose as an installer. Mikey, thanks a bunch for the update. I'm super excited. I think you're going to have a very busy winter.
Me too.
Bye for now, folks.
Take care.